This morning, we're having a conversation about safeguarding Ghana's stability against serious and organized crime threats in the 2024 elections. And so we've been conducting elections. This will be the ninth election since our return to democracy. And I know that there are many of you who probably have paid attention, particularly to the 2020 elections. You saw what happened, persons being killed as a result. You've also been monitoring political party primaries. You've asked yourself, the simple question, why is money involved in all of these? And why is it that people would do everything just to get in power? But the question is, those who support these persons, where do they get their monies from? And what role do they get to play in a democracy? Well, I've already told you that this morning we're joined by Leo Anthony Siama, who's Deputy Head Legal and Prosecution Economic and Organized Crime Office, IOCO, Mary Ada, who's Executive Director, Ghana Integrity Initiative, and Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante, who's Director of Advocacy and Policy Engagement, Ghana Center for Democratic Development, CDD, Ghana. Once again, thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. And maybe I start off with you, Mary, because we're talking about serious and organized crime and the threats that it could pose to elections in 2024. Somebody says, well, we've been conducting elections. We've not complained. We seem to be happy with the elections we're conducting. Why all of a sudden they need to have a conversation about threats of serious and organized crimes?
Thank you very much, Winston, and let me say good morning to your listeners and also to my co-panelists. I believe that this is not a new discussion whatsoever, but increasingly we have, as a people, as you have played some clips just before we started, we have, as a people, begun to appreciate the fact that corruption is not leaving us any day soon, and it's becoming a multifaceted monster. It's increasingly changing faces, and people are using all sort of means and ways to ensure that they are benefiting from the system. We do not want to sit aloof to watch and then see our country go into flames like others have done. We were in Tamale about a week ago, and some of the sentiments of the youth when it comes to what is going on, particularly around elections and the crimes that are committed thereof, it's become apparent that we cannot keep quiet. We need to talk about the issue. The politicians themselves have sat aloof and watched on. They are also getting worried because it's increasingly, our elections are becoming more monetized. There's a lot of evidence to show that crime and criminal activity is funding some of the electorates, and state capture, as we mentioned the other day, is becoming evident that people is increasing, even though it's not gone into the proportions we should be worried about. But it's becoming evident that criminal activity is getting people involved in politics, and those who benefit from the politics then also have to repay these people. So the decisions of states are made from these elements who are using criminal activity, coordinated very well. It's engaged by these people behind, and then they are drawing the strings of states. So we elect people into power who are sitting there not able to make any decision on our part. They make all the promises that when they get into power, they will do a lot of good things for us. But then the reality strikes them because they have to repay. People did a lot of wrong things to get them in power, and so they need to recoup their monies. And they are legalizing their wrong by allowing them. So we see elements like the CDD did a survey, and that survey showed that people in Galamsey were funding political actors. And Winston, I heard you say a politician mentioned the same to you. Such persons, when they support you, they want to legitimize their businesses. And so when you come into power, certainly you cannot do otherwise but to help them to legitimize their businesses. And that's why we have heard and it's been evidence that the fight against galamsey, we can talk and make all the noise, but when it comes to the benefits of those who are making the decisions, it doesn't, we don't gain much.
Okay.
We are not gaining anything at all.
Let me bring you in, Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante, and find out the activities that you would classify as serious and organized crime.
I think there are many, and Yoko is here, so I'm sure they even have a tall list of activities, but from everything from illegal fishing to illegal small-scale mining to the ones they call the fraud boys, the 419, and the kinds of monies that flow through there. It's so serious that people don't really take it seriously, but and I'm sure, as I said, Yoko can speak to that a lot more. But one of the things that we really take for granted is drugs. I think it was in 2022, the World Drug Report did cite Ghana as a major transit point in West Africa for drug shipment coming through South America, through here, and to Europe. And a lot of fisher folks are involved in sort of lifting and transporting these drugs. So there are so many different things that are going on around us that we just take for granted. But one of the things that is very obvious is that everybody knows that there's a lot of money that is floating around, and we just can't make sense of it. We know people who just all of a sudden come into money. We don't know what work they were doing to generate those kinds of returns, but they come into money. And particularly, it's more pronounced in politics, where it just all of a sudden, this is night and day stuff. Within a year, somebody can acquire a number of buildings, properties, cars, this and that, and it's fine. And that is the thing. I think that's really the alarm that I think we are trying to sort of sound. That type of activity, we have to find a way of putting a stop to it, because it has such a debilitating effect on governance. A lot of our policy incoherence is really as a result of this. So somebody cannot make a decision that will benefit the broader welfare of people, because they are beholden to somebody else, or they actually have to serve as a protection, a buffer for a criminal activity. So the 419 people who would come to you, and you see, you can even just imagine, sometimes it's even dangerous. The person comes to you, and if you say no, then you yourself are a marked person, right? So you can just imagine that in certain corridors where that kind of criminal activity is happening, if you are not on board, then really you are at risk.
Okay.
So we have to, and it's getting more dangerous, and I think that's where I think the alarm is important. For even the politicians, they shouldn't place themselves. We haven't even talked about terrorism, which is the one that's easier, because a lot of the jihadist activities that are going on in the Sahel, a lot of the finances coming from gold mining, illegal gold mining, drugs, all kinds of illegal activity, smuggling, and so on and so forth. And so that kind of infiltration, if they want that is where they now get their money from. There are some places you will find it very hard to even say that, no, I'm not going to take that kind of money, because then you cannot be part of the system that have been set up.
Okay.
So I think we really need to pay a very serious attention to this. Otherwise, we'll wake up one day and it will be much harder to fight this menace.
Leo, Dr. Asante made the point. You may want to add more, but of course it's your office's responsibility also in curbing some of these things. And so while we're here talking about this, we should be celebrating you for having kept it, isn't it?
Well, this is an issue that's not restricted or a Yoko problem alone. Yes, we have the mandate, but we need a concerted effort. All stakeholders. It's very important for us to come together, create the awareness first, let the populace know what we are dealing with, the canker we are dealing with, before we are able to now find solutions. But if we want to only concentrate on investigations and prosecutions, we'll be getting nowhere. The most important thing that we must take notice of now is that these are not foreign concepts. In the past, we used to hear about organized crime, serious and organized crime, and we think of the mafia, we think of the Cosa Nostra in Italy and other jurisdictions, and we assume it's not here. But Doc raised the point, talking about drug issues in Ghana. And then the question you should ask yourself is, why has Ghana become a hub for these drug trades? It means that whoever, for instance, the Cali cartel would have links here for them to be able to use Ghana as a transit point. So almost immediately you should realize that there's an existence of these organized criminal groups here. They are taking advantage of the vulnerabilities within our setup, and there's a need for us, all of us. It's not a one person fight. It's a concerted effort, a general effort for us to take this head on.
But talking about general effort, yes, we all agree. But for you with the mandate also, what's the difficulty in dealing with it?
Well, the difficulty has to be, for instance, some of the loopholes in the laws. If we are talking about campaign financing, for instance, which is an avenue, a very vulnerable area for SOCs to be able to infiltrate or push illegal monies there, you are looking at the inadequacy of some of our laws. For instance, the laws that regulate our campaign financing in Ghana do not tell us or do not cap the amount of money that an individual may contribute to a political party. In other jurisdictions, there's a cap. So if you do not have caps, or you do not have stringent rules that regulate these things, then you have a problem. Those for us are some of the loopholes, because they exploit these. If you look at the Political Parties Act, that is one of the laws that regulates this. It even gives an individual an opportunity to even give on two thresholds to a political party. The first is the individual level, where it defines, it says that a citizen may give money to a political party. It then goes out to also say again that a citizen may be a body corporate. So you are looking at a firm, a partnership that has 75% of the capital belonging to a citizen. So a citizen in two forms would donate, and there's again no cap. If you look at those things, and then also the difficulties in trying to prosecute some of these things, it becomes very difficult.
I actually wanted to just give you two examples, because it's the two recent examples. I mean, yes, there are live cases, but at least we kind of all aware of them. I mean, if you take the Park case, for instance, in sense of, okay, money is found. Ordinarily, you would say, okay, the person would just have to show that they own it. It's like you are driving a car and the police stops you and say, oh, I'm the owner of the car, and you are not really able to prove it. That immediately sort of shift the burden onto the person, to prove that they are the owner of the car. Because we don't have laws, our laws are limited in terms of dealing with unexplained wealth, for instance. You cannot really pursue that order, and eventually you find very difficult to pursue the case. In the ABNJ case, for instance, when the money was frozen, the person can go and freeze it. It just sorry.
Okay, we'll get back to you shortly.
Okay, come back.
Yes, we'll get back to you shortly, so you tell us more about that. But and you've raised a very important issue. We'll get back and interrogate all of that. This morning we're joined by Leo Anthony Siama, who is Deputy Head, Legal and Prosecution, Economic and Organized Crime Office. Mary Awelana Ada is Executive Director, Ghana Integrity Initiative, and Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante, who is Director of Advocacy and Policy Engagement at the Ghana Center for Democratic Development. When we come back, we'll find out from Leo also, what investigations they've conducted, and what they found when it comes to serious and organized crimes. You've raised a very important issue about an issue which is in the public domain. We'll talk about that briefly. But most importantly, how do we mitigate all of this? What roles must all of us play in dealing with this?
On air. your morning radio.
I know that we're trying to get the attention of the public and get them educated on these concepts. Are we also targeting the political parties? Because it seems to me that they are probably best placed to start any process that will end this kind of involvement. If a political party says we will disqualify anybody who cannot explain their source of funding or who accesses funding from prohibited sources, if they were to say that, that would immediately end the situation, wouldn't it?
Yeah. If you look at our laws that regulate political parties, there's an obligation on the political parties to provide a comprehensive list of donors, people who give out monies to them to finance their political activities as well. So again, it has to do with enforcement. If we can enforce that bit of the law where the requirement is on them to produce these documents, then that will be a starting point. But you see, the problem has to and over the years we've heard MPs, we've heard people in power talk about the burdens of office in terms of the financial drains and constraints that come with it. I think there was a 2018 report by the CDD and I think Westminster Foundation, and it says between 2016 and the 2020 elections, I think the cost
2012 and
2016, yes, the cost of standing for as MP went up by 59%.
Yeah.
And again, the report said if you want to secure the nomination of your party alone, you are looking at about 400,000 cedis just to secure the nomination of your party. And as of 2008, that was accumulation of 2 years' salary for an MP. So almost immediately you see where the problem is. So if we do not have the heart to demand accountability in terms of where some of these finances are coming from, again, that's where the problem is. We have the laws, it's about enforcement.
And talking about the laws and enforcement, Leo, I just want you to tell us what serious and organized crime is, for those who may not know, and what it includes, so we have a better understanding of it.
So generally, an SOC or serious or an organized crime is any criminal activity that is planned, coordinated, and committed by people working in individual groups or across transnational networks. And the main purpose of these groups is to centers around acquiring money, profits, power, and influence. And when you conduct an examination on them, I'll say an academic examination on them, you are looking at them having an ideology or not. So depending on the group, some for the purposes of terrorism, for instance, may have an ideology, others may not. You'd also look at structure. There's a hierarchy in place. There's continuity of the group. So a person is arrested, for instance, sentenced or convicted and sentenced. You realize the group's activity also still goes on. You're looking at the use of illegal enterprises as an unlawful activities to derive these monies. And then you also look at the feature of them having or trying to use legitimate businesses to launder these monies to kind of wash them. And then most importantly, they build very strategic alliances. These are some of the features. And you asked the question just before we went on a break into investigations that YOCO has conducted into some of these groups. And over the past 3 or 4 years, we've noticed a trend. And like I said earlier, if you listen to the definitions or the descriptions of SOCs, you may think that it is not here. But within the past 3-4 years, some of the investigations that we have conducted, especially in reference to an area like Asinfosu, which has become a hotbed, you realize these structured groups exist where they have built or have membership within even the banking communities, telcos, where they are able to get information to facilitate on these criminal offenses. You are also looking at, we've also investigated some of the human trafficking rings around, and they even have a more structured look where they have about 3 or 4 or 5 layers in terms of leadership and hierarchy, where there's a reporting direction in terms of it flowing from the bottom to the top. So there's control, and these people have, again, strategic alliances. So you realize that we bust the ring, we are conducting investigations, and certain caliber of persons show up and have
which caliber of person?
So you were talking about people who claim, oh, I'm from here, I'm from there. When
From
I say I'm
where?
from here, you were talking about maybe politicians. I have this politician's number, I have this person's number, I have this person's contact. And then you realize that, or you try to create a contact as to why he should have that kind of person's number. But again, these are some of the problems that we are facing.
Talking about, why you should have this kind of person's number, and that'll bring us to the discussion we're having today. Is it that these persons actually sponsor, sometimes play a role in getting some of these politicians elected into office, or support them with campaigning, and so the politicians feel indebted to these people, and thus are in sort of some connivance with them?
Ultimately, this is what we should be looking at, and that's the connection we are trying to draw. Investigations, again, investigations will ultimately reveal these. At times, people can get naughty, and we've had a couple of instances where someone has said or mentioned the name of a high-ranking government official and said, "Oh, this person, I know this person. Call him or talk to him." You also push along and try to do that, and it turns out not to be the person. So when it comes to these kind of things, you must ensure that whatever investigations you are carrying out is well coordinated, that it does not divert the attention of the investigations or lead you to make the defamatory statements about an innocent person.
Mary, I saw you nodding, and I beg your pardon, Lewis made that point. I mean, but why would anybody say, I know this politician, if he's not played any role in that person's election, or doesn't have the support of that person?
I believe that in the society in which we live, sometimes, I remember recently, the Yoko boss made a statement that we make statements which sometimes are unfounded, but also because of the communal nature of our living. We know people, we do things for people, and so the tendency to mention them is usually very high when we are in trouble. It is the same thing that manifests when we are either in police, caught by the police, or we have to respond to something. We quickly rely on these social networks that we have developed over time to ensure that we circumvent some processes. Even though it may not be the right things to do, that's what we have done, and that's why corruption has also increased in most of our instances, and the instances of SOC have also gone virtually mostly unpunished. We see a lot of politicians using some of these elements in our community. He mentioned some communities. The Zongos are also there. People use them during electioneering campaigns. They become indebted to them because they've used them to foment trouble, to get themselves elected into power. And so when they are caught, and in fact, they use some of their money as well for their campaigns. They sponsor them. Because studying this phenomenon, you realize that most of our politicians take these people's monies, and these people push them to also make policies that favor them. They push them to help them clean their resources. And so if they call on you, they say, I know this person. In most of the instances, I can't say that for Leo. Perhaps Leo is a public servant. He is also an investigator. He's a lawyer. He would say that you would need to investigate to substantiate or validate some of the claims, but in many of the instances, behind the scenes, strings are pulled for some of these purposes because they've supported them, because they have invested in their campaigns, and because they are there for them. And these are SOC related issues that we can't run. I remember one of the cases that came up which was related to the GRA, when there was this bunkering allegations. And you realize the audios that came out, the sort of people who were calling to say, oh, let these people go, and the person recorded it and sent it out. These are criminal elements who are supported by people who should know better. they are not doing so, and millions of Ghanaian cedis is going down the drain or into their pockets. If I say down the drain, it means it's going somewhere else, but into personal pockets of public servants and also political elements in our society.
Now, let me get to you, Dr. Asante. You're a lawyer too, and I want you to do the linkage between this and elections, and most importantly, the impact on our democracy.
Yeah, thank you. And I think so. You have to look at the campaign. So it's not even just campaign financing, but party financing as well. That whole area is vulnerable, because for serious and organized crime, what is the threat to their activities? It's law enforcement and the law. So the people who are in authority, who can actually, pursue that threat, are the ones that you want to strategically bring on your side. And election financing provides that that space, because if you can contribute to that person's campaign, sometimes I'm sure some of these politicians, they don't even know that these individuals are into those things, because maybe the person they will send, maybe a person that you think, oh well, he's some local businessman or whatever. You don't know what connections he has to serious and organized crime. So, and because there is no filter, there's really no checks on who is donating. The party also hasn't created any system for checking. And we've always said that even though the party in most of our laws is the one that's supposed to account, the money always goes to the individual candidate or the individual aspirant. So that's where a lot of the flow of the money, and that somebody comes to you in your house or whatever. So there's really no filters in terms of how, the flow of money into the campaigns and the politics and so on and so forth. Now the implications are, for me, very simple, and we've seen it over time. Once the process for electing your leaders is corrupted, then you should not expect that the people who come out of it are going to be able to stop corruption when they get into government. Now, the more the money, because and all the studies show. So when we did the 2016 one, we did some in 2020, and the estimations was now $600,000, over $600,000, basically to stand as an MP. For presidential elections, it's moved to maybe about 150 million now to $200 million, to stand. Now, when those monies are being talked about, then you can just imagine what kinds of flows. And because it's competitive, if Mr. A is doing this, then you also want to try and counter what Mr. B is, because you understand that the populace are also open to being bribed, so that they vote for you, whether as delegates or whatever. That all of that makes it more serious when you get into government. It means the kinds of money you have to recover when you're in government is even more, right? So everything from even just basic policy. So sometimes you sit down there, you look at the policy, and you don't understand how is it possible that a group of people sat down and came up with this policy that completely undermines our public, our national interest, or does not inure to the public interest in any way. And yet, this is a policy that everybody is pursuing. One of the things that Manasseh has talked about for a long time, like his fumigation contracts, all of that. You understand? But why is it that everybody is saying that this is not good for us, and yet everybody is defending it? So you get a lot of these policy incoherence in government because there's interest to be protected. And sometimes when it comes to SOC, and I'm sure the investigative bodies and will talk about it, that serious crimes, committed, and then all of a sudden people appear who have authority to say, let this person go or let this person stay. And that's when you begin to understand the kind of the reaches that serious organized crime has into politics. So what we really need to look at is, if this is a vulnerable area, how do we make sure it's properly regulated so it reduces the opportunities for SOC to really penetrate into our politics and then undermine basically our stability, because you just need one terrorist attack and everything that we are talking about just changes.
Great. So we'll continue the conversation this morning. You just heard from Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante, who's Director of Advocacy and Policy Engagement of the Ghana Center for Democratic Development, CDD Ghana. You've also heard from Mary Ada, who's Executive Director of Ghana Integrity Initiative, and Leo Anthony Siama, who's Deputy Head Legal and Prosecution of EOCO. We're talking about serious and organized crime and its effect on one, elections, and by extension our democracy, and how we can safeguard these threats. And the most important thing is how we can protect our democracy from the threats that SOCs pose to our democracy. Let's get into the solutions. I mean, what we must do, what must be done to ensure we're able to deal with this. And I'll start off with you, Leo, because we're looking at first the role of the state and its institutions and agencies. What roles must they play?
First of all, again, as usual, the ultimate mandate lies with us. So we must ensure, as a matter of urgency, to enforce the laws that are in existence, come together and try and bridge the vulnerable loopholes that are within. So, for instance, and I say this in particular reference to an emerging trend we are seeing in the laundering of assets. We've realized that there's an increasing shift in laundering assets through cryptocurrency. If you look at general law enforcement landscape, you realize that we have inadequate training or know-how in terms of how we deal with stuff like this. So that is one area. We are also looking at the continuation of what EOCO has started.
Hold on with that one. Laundering of assets to cryptocurrency. Tell me more about that.
Okay. So what we've noticed, or we are noticing, is that now criminals tend to divert the monies or the things, or liquidate the assets that they have gotten and then store it in crypto wallets. Basically, that's what we are seeing now. If you look at, I cannot offhand remember the document, but it said at least 900,000 Ghanaians, that's about 3% of the population, have some form of cryptocurrency account. So
Ghana is actually top 5 Africa.
Exactly. So this
about
is
31%.
Yes.
Have some access to cryptocurrency.
Exactly. Which is.
So I mean, rather than, because you want access to electronic transfer, you take the cash, you go and buy cryptocurrency, and now you are online. You can trade with it.
Exactly.
Anywhere.
Exactly. So it's creating it's creating a lot of problems for us. If you are aware, there's this Bank of Ghana directive that says that anybody or anyone entering through our entry points in the country should declare in any amount in excess of $10,000, for instance. That used to be very easy to enforce. But if you were looking at the cryptocurrency problem, where somebody has laundered money in terms of huge amounts of money on wallets, how are we able to even identify what he's holding or how to go about it? So these are all gray areas as well. And then finally, I believe that investigations and prosecution is one thing, but we must ensure that there's a relentless drive on education and awareness creation. And this is where the media comes in to help us, and the dissemination of information in terms of what we have gotten or what we have encountered during investigations as well as prosecution.
Mary, what should the state agencies be doing?
Yes, so for instance, they should be collaborating even more forcefully. We've seen in the case of Shraj and others putting together a coordination mechanism where they are working together on exchanging information and also allowing those who are better placed to investigate to do so. And I know EOCO is part of this MOU. And so they should be seen to be doing more of that and then less of the theft wars, because we have seen in other cases where either the police is investigating, the same thing is being done by Yoko, the same thing is being done by Shraj, and increasingly the office of the special prosecutor too. So they should do more coordination. They should also collaborate with civil society to do a lot more awareness raising and sensitization to build capacity of the citizens to identify SOC, and then also create avenues for citizens to report SOC, and also make sure that the Witness Protection Act that has been passed is activated. The state is supposed to put in place an agency that is supposed to, a commission, that is supposed to promote issues around the witness protection. We haven't seen anything. So that is an issue that we should be paying attention to, because if citizens want to stand on behalf of the state to make to defend or make contributions to the cases of state, they should be assured that they will be protected. Whistleblower Act is another area we need to popularize. Till now, since 2006, many people do not even know it exists. There is an element of compensation in there which we need to see being activated. We know that in most of the investigative institutions, they have another layer of compensation where people who make complaints to them or give them evidence are given some sort of compensation. Let's activate the Whistleblower Act compensation so that it bolsters the confidence of citizens to ensure that they are reporting. Civil society is complementing this as well with the various platforms we have. Corruption Watch is one of them. The Ghana Integrity Initiative also has the ALAC, the Advocacy and Legal Advice Center. These are platforms that would help people who want to make their corruption and SOC related issues known come to ensure that they are doing that. Ultimately, the state agencies should be seen to be pursuing this. If they do not, then the trust of the citizen diminishes. We have seen a lot of evidence on air, on TV, on radio, on issues around campaign vote buying, where citizens are very bold, demanding that because their monies have not been given, they would not vote. We have seen MPs on listening to MPs on radio saying, if they give 1 million, I'll give 2 million, and yet nothing has happened. In some of those cases, let's go forward to see how we can pursue some of this and do it very well. The OSP has been doing some of that. I remember they called some of these culprits and they are investigating. That is what we want to see. And then we should see more of, after the investigation, what next? The prosecution. And so we believe that the prosecuting agencies, the judiciary, also has a role in fast-tracking some of these to ensure that we are bolstering confidence of the citizenry in our institutions. Until then, the confidence is very low, because we see that they start the issues and somehow they just go off. We have seen it with LaBianca, we have seen it with Cecilia Dapa when it comes to the OSP. And I am very sure we'll see it with many others which are related to elections and also SOC as we traverse the electioneering campaigns during 2024. They should be more up and doing. Citizens should also demand some accountability from the state agencies, because they have been put there to ensure that things are done. And so when the state agencies too are confronted by our citizens who wear cassocks and the big men, so-called, that they should let some things go, they should also be willing and available to name and shame some of these people. I believe that is the beginning of our fight. It is a good step, even though it's not the ultimate. But if they name and shame them, it will discourage others from wanting to engage in such behaviors in future.
Great. And talking about the cryptocurrency, so globally, Ghana actually ranks 29, by way of transaction, and in Africa we rank 5. We have transactions totaling about $5 billion. I think that was in 2022. So a lot of people are engaged in it, particularly among the youth. And you've just told us of how some persons are also transferring their assets into these cryptocurrencies. Anyway, Dr. Pupuni Asante. So, what role must citizens? I mean, Mary has talked about it briefly, but what roles must citizens play in ensuring that we're able to deal with SOCs?
I think for me, for 2024, the challenge, or I wouldn't call it a challenge because I don't think it's a challenge. The laws are very clear in terms of like things like vote buying and soliciting and so on. So PNDC law 284 is very, very clear that you cannot solicit for money to exercise your franchise, and if even you are facilitating, you are also basically violating the law. I think law enforcement should take a very aggressive posture, for dealing with both the sellers and the buyers of votes for 2024. I think we have been talking about this for so long. There has to be something that changes in the air that suggests that this is really a serious problem and we are trying to tackle it. Often when you start talking about going after the sellers of votes, people say, oh, but poor people, they are also trying. Well, it's a cycle. If we don't break it, we will continue to have a very, very serious problem. So for me, I think that is one low-hanging fruit, that because the law is clear, it's very comprehensive in terms of solicitation, facilitation. There are all kinds of people that can be caught within that law. The second thing is really that we need to look at a comprehensive legislation on party and campaign financing. I've looked extensively through all the laws. It's very difficult to amend and revise different types of laws. You need a very comprehensive law that deals with both the donation part and the expenditure part. I always say that there's a lot of expenditure that goes on in election that we don't need, right? And that is one of the reasons that's driving all this monetization. Because of competition, people try to outdo each other. But there's a lot of things that we don't really need to do in order for people to send their messages and so on and so forth. So we really do need to work on that. We started work on that already. We have some draft proposals. We are trying to get the International Foundation for Electoral Systems to actually develop best practice legislation that we can also then adapt to our own circumstances, so that we can all come to a consensus as to what is realistic for one to sort of prosecute a campaign that you can reach people and all of that, and really reduce the cost of organizing elections across board. We have to regulate internal party processes, because now it's almost like a private self-regulation. So a lot of the times the parties themselves don't make any effort to try to deal with the corruption within parties and so on. So that process has to be standardized, and it has to be something that applies any party that is putting themselves up to be a government in waiting or whatever it is, has to follow those rules. So that really should be the major medium step. But at least in the short term, there are laws that prevent some of these things from happening, and we have to signal to everybody that they cannot just go on engaging in illegalities, and we are all watching. If we begin to see that, I think you see that people would take this a bit more seriously.
Right. Thank you very, very much, Dr. Kojo Pupuni Asante, who's Director of Advocacy and Policy Engagement, Ghana Center for Democratic Development, CDD Ghana. Thank you also, Mary Ada, who's Executive Director of the Ghana Integrity Initiative, and Leo Anthony Siama, who's Deputy Head Legal and Prosecution of EOCO, for making time to join us this morning on this all-important conversation about curbing SOCs within our elections and democracy. We're also grateful to the Ghana Anti-Corruption Coalition in consortium with the Ghana Integrity Initiative and the Africa Center for Energy Policy for putting all of this together, with funding support from the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, FCDO, and UKAID. Thank you, all of you, for joining us.